Hello there. Today going to be doing a little experimental build, seeing how polyfilla works in a build and making some crusty plant type things. I'll be using some polystyrene balls as the underlying structure, using a base from foam core trimmed down and the edges beveled. So I'm aiming for a kind of bulbous growthy type thing, with the polystyrene balls as the base, some cut in half so they're submerged into the ground, and then we're going to have spires sticking out of them. But for now, attaching the polystyrene using hot glue. So the egg-shaped piece would sit a bit better on the base. I trimmed the top off, then glued that next to it so I'd get a bit more use out of it. Taking a combination of toothpicks and bamboo skewers, I then stabbed them into the eggs, then reversed them and glued them in. To break up the uniformity of the orbs, I then took some half beads and glued them on using Mod Podge. To blend these together, I took some kitchen paper, dipped it in a mixture of PVA and water, then used it to kind of paper mache the piece together. This is mostly to break up the texture on the polystyrene, but also to blend the spikes into the base as well. Moving on to the experimental stage, I had some general all-purpose polyfilla left over from some housework, which I applied using a slightly knackered brush, then gave a lumpy coat over the entire piece. To get a gritty texture, I also stippled using the end of the brush, which was great when it didn't then stick to the brush even more. Once the polyfilla had dried, I went in with a black gesso, and with a softer brush, primed the entire thing, making sure to get into the nooks and crannies where the polyfilla had made some weird texture. For the ground paste, I used my standard recipe of sand, black gesso and PVA, mix that together, then smear that over the base. I overlapped the texture paste onto the structure, so it would be a bit more natural. Using burnt umber and watering it down some, I then applied a base coat onto the ground texture. For the spores, I wanted them to have a kind of inner glow, turning to a yellowy, crusty husk, so I started out with a base coat of red paint. This was followed by a heavy-handed dry brush of yellow. The goal here was to only have the red visible in the deeper recesses of the texture. Back on the base, I then took a tan sand colour and applied a medium dry brush of that. This also went slightly onto the base of the spores to blend them back into the base colour. Here's where I made a questionable decision and took some green paint and slightly dry brushed that in patches over the piece as well. In hindsight, this was a bad decision because it was just too many colours and a bit too vibrant for my liking. With most of the painting done, I added a few choice tufts. It was about here that I realised I didn't like the green. It just had a bit too much confusion in terms of colour. Taking the yellow paint that I'd used on the second layer, then went in and applied it over the top of the green, which eliminated most of it and just made it a bit of variation underneath the yellow, which looked a lot better in my opinion. The main purpose of this piece was to give me a chance to play around the polyfilla before I use it on other builds, and just see what effects I can get with that. And I quite like the crusty, horrible looking spores it's made. So these would be a nice useful little addition to a sci-fi or a wasteland board. Definitely a technique I'll be looking to improve on, and involve in other builds later on. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope to catch you next time.